AI with artificial intelligence, it's coded to be as advanced as possible and as intelligent as possible. But the area that it lacks is it lacks the unique factor of a human. We are actually not just in decision fatigue, but we are in decision overwhelm. There's a high probability that you'll lose that customer, that client at some point. At some point, they will wake up and they will say, you know what, this wasn't worth it, and I'm going to cancel this.
What do they always say? Never trust a perfect person. Mm-hmm. Never trust a song that's flawless. It may actually just be a line from a 21 Pilots song. A little bit of a 90s grunge vibe, right? Yeah. Very good. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of 49 Volts. I'm your host, as always, Josh. I am a disaster, not as always. As many of you know, we're moving into newer, bigger offices, and I did take a little time and prop the sign up back there haphazardly on a chair, praying it doesn't fall and break. But one thing that is not a disaster, we have an amazing guest today, and this is actually going to make even a little more sense with Don Marone, who is our most recent guest. He's an AI expert, and we talked about technology and how that's going to affect everything. And today we have someone that is very expert in human connections, public speaking. You have a great list of accomplishments, but I don't want to butcher it, so I'm going to introduce Yaronah Boster, and thanks for coming on the show.
It is lovely to be here. Thank you.
I appreciate it. So you have a long list of accomplishments. So I'm going to let you give the elevator pitch on what it is that you do and what you've done.
Thank you. Well, it's funny because I always say my accomplishments are just the things I've done, but they're not really the totality of who I am. And I think that's true for every single human being. And when we figure that out, it's pretty awesome. I will short and sweet. 18 years in the fields and studies of early childhood, human development, psychology, and coaching. My area of expertise in this stage of my life is really in communications, and I study a lot in linguistics. I'm going to nerd for a second here and let everybody know one of my favorite places to go to read things is the Library of Medicine. I read all the journals. So read all the studies, read all the journals, read everything right from the source, because to me, knowledge is power when it's not taken through the lens of someone else's perspective. And that is really hard for a lot of people to accomplish, because the truth is we all have individualized perspectives. Every single one of us is not neutral. Every single one of us perceives the information we receive through the lens of our personal experiences and our preconditioning. And that's just a huge part of how we are and how we operate as humans.
So is that why everything someone says to me sounds like food? Because I really love food and I'm always hungry?
Sure, absolutely.
So I wanted to kick off the discussion, and we had a talk a couple weeks ago that it went a whole other direction, because initially, I kind of connected with you, and my thinking was there's a lot of public speaking events, which is something you have a lot of experience with, and you also provide coaching for. And I know, like, for my father, who became president of Bixby, for those in our audience that are familiar with that organization, his ability to do public speaking and be a keynote speaker really enhanced his experience, really helped his career grow, really helped him reach new heights. And I think there's a lot of talented people out there in the audience and in these low voltage industries that by nature, I don't know what it is about our industry. I know there's always some hesitance there, but it seems like with us, we're a little extra shy about getting in front of folks. So initially when I reached out to you, well, that was kind of the focus, but I wanted to start somewhere else first. We had a really interesting guest in our last episode, Don Marone, and Don has started an AI company that he is from our security industry in the low voltage world, and he's building workers and consulting and building solutions for businesses to automate processes. And his perspective is it's to help people focus on what they want to do and what they're best at, and not waste their time on the things that nobody wants to do. However, if you watch the news and you follow, I feel like every significant layoff is being blamed on AI. I don't know that I really believe it, but that is the fear out there for everyone, is that AI is just going to kind of remove humans from the equation. And, my first question to you, with all this fear, I mean, to me in marketing, I feel that there's nothing that really replaces the authenticity, the genuine connection that we make with humans, even if it's a really good fake. At some point we adapt, we realize it's a fake, and we want a real connection. I mean, am I just hoping, like you just mentioned, perspective, as someone that, my business thrives on human connection and the human experience? Am I just wishful thinking here, or do you see it a similar way?
I see it exactly the same way. I do not believe that it is ever going to be possible for AI to completely replicate a human. And that's because there's something distinctively different and distinctively instinctive about human connection. You cannot get the same thing from AI, no matter how advanced it is. And yes, of course, all of those dystopian movies and novels and all of the, they all pretend like it's possible. But the truth is, we humans have an instinct for humanity. We have that in our DNA. It is coded in us. That is not something replicatable, no matter how advanced we get. So there's always going to be space and place for human connection and human communication. It's very distinctively different. And the reason for that is because you can't pre-anticipate a response. You can't. Here's a wonderful statistic. About 13 years ago, they did a study that showed, based on your genetic traits, where and when you arrived in the world, who made, all of your ancestors and antecedents that got you to where you are. And then as you move through the world, the experiences that are unique to you. We are as unique as 1 in 400 trillion humans. Every being is that unique.
Wow.
Yeah. And we don't even have 400 trillion human beings in recorded history yet. So with that unique factor, we're talking about the aspect of you never know the real depths of another person, which means you can't pre-anticipate what their response is going to be. Whereas with AI, with artificial intelligence, it's coded to be as advanced as possible and as intelligent as possible. But the area that it lacks the unique factor of a human. So that's not something replicatable, not at this time at least. And I think it's going to take a long time before we get there. And the truth is, honestly, we like to make ourselves be afraid. And that's because fear is a stimulant and it pushes us to do things. And it's a part of our survival instinct. I was telling you earlier, part of our survival instinct, the irony, I think, of humanity is that we are coded to fear change when change is the only thing that we can be absolutely sure of. So this is just yet another component to change, but I don't think it's going to replace the human connection at its core. It's in my way of thinking of it, it's like a facsimile of humanity. When you send someone a fax, when you send someone a photocopy of something, it's a copy, and it might be the clearest, most beautiful copy you've ever seen, but it's still a copy of the original. Yep. And we haven't figured out how to remake an original yet. So,
I think that's an interesting thing you just said too, because there's constant, I feel like my entire life, the biggest story is the biggest thing that's going to end, humanity or end the planet, or, it's just always focused around, the worst disaster, and it's coming, and it to me, just, I guess that's part of, as we get older in life and more experience, I've kind of learned that most things tend to be pretty positive or somewhere in the middle where there's some positives if you understand how to work with it, take advantage of it, negatives if you don't. But this has been something really since ChatGPT was released by OpenAI a couple of years ago. I mean, I feel like the fear mongering has really been ramped up significantly. I mean, do you just on like a personal level, because I think it's interesting because you're more in a, psychology type of a background versus most of the audience here is very technical. Do you then see like promise and hope with AI that we may be able to do a lot of things better and faster and allow even folks like yourself to really focus on what you want to do and maybe not the paperwork and the mundane tasks associated? Or do you look at this and say, hey, there's a lot of danger here that we may harm humanity in some way, if not maybe just psychologically?
So something I found out a little while back, I've never taken an IQ test in my life. And then I decided one day randomly, I should do that. So I took one, and apparently I am a genius at recognizing patterns.
Ooh.
I've always seen patterns. And do you remember the Silicon Valley boom and the whole everybody's going to start a new online company and this and that. And then it got saturated to the point that it became really difficult. And now we're moving back into that place. Same thing with AI, and it's getting saturated again.
Mm-hmm.
What I think about AI is that we are driven in this place where everybody's like, I've got to compete here because clearly it's a big market. It's a big market. It's going to get oversaturated to the point that it's probably going to crash at some point. And when I say crash, I don't mean it's going to fall apart entirely, but the ones
Mm-hmm.
that are working really well, really, really well, those are going to fly. And then the other ones are going to just dissipate. And then we're going to focus more on how do we parent AI? And I know this sounds really crazy, but here's the thing. As a parent, it's your responsibility to guide, to provide moral clarity, to provide wisdom, knowledge, and experience. We need to do the same thing for AI. We need to give it the clarity it needs to show humanity, compassion, and empathy. And when we do that, we're going to be okay. And there's enough people, enough experts. Mo Gaudat is one of them. He was the chief business officer for Google X, the artificial intelligence of Google, for a long time. He's one of those voices out in the world talking about how do we do this? How do we help AI learn what humanity really needs, despite our great ability to shoot our own selves in the feet. Because we're really good at that.
We are.
But the truth is, there's enough people now having the fear incentivization to help us try to figure out how to manage this and how to cultivate a better environment for AI. So I have hope for that there's enough people out there that actually want to do this. I want to do that from parenting perspective. One of the things about technology we do understand is that when we give technology to the developing brain, especially handheld devices, it is extremely detrimental to the growth and development. And it actually hits the same receptors in the brain as drugs and alcohol. So I will tell every parent, I'm like, well, if you're not opening your liquor cabinet to your 5-year-old and telling them to have at it, then maybe don't hand them a device too.
Right.
So we're learning. We're starting to learn. A lot of times it's like we let the horse out of the barn and now we're trying to corral it, right? Eventually we will. Right now the horse is running around crazy and we're freaking out, but eventually we will corral it. We will get there because that's what we do best as a species. We progress, and then we go into a space of regression where we're falling. It seems like everything's falling apart, and then we progress again. So I have great hope for that to happen. And I think the first place that we need to do that is to ensure that when we're feeling disconnected from other people, we don't go online on social media and start scrolling and things like that. We pick up a phone and we talk to a friend. We go out for coffee. We go out for a night with our friends. We talk to another human being. It is the most important thing we can do. Just talk to another human being.
I feel like that's the speech my wife gives me all the time. Stop texting me. You need to come over and talk to me. You mentioned parenting AI. I mean, so from the standpoint of a psychologist, I mean, do you hope to see more regulation from like a government perspective with the hopes that they are more agnostic or ideally more interested in the good for people themselves? Or are you more in the camp of the government is more likely to be nefarious and we should trust the billionaires who I don't think many of us trust?
I think the onus of responsibility is on every individual person in their individual
I
life.
like that.
The best way we can do this is a ripple effect from the ground up. It is not possible. See, what's funny, what most people don't realize is that actually the way our government and the way the billionaires move has a lot more to do with the people on the ground than they realize. It doesn't feel like it because they have a lot of power and they have a lot of authority. I always think about power and authority as responsibility. Unfortunately, what is the famous saying? Great power corrupts greatly, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, the truth is, in my mind, there's a lot of leaders that are starting to become a lot more consciously aware of it. We have a lot of people who are trying to do what's called service leadership, to understand that having power and authority means you actually have a great responsibility to the people you have power and authority over. And there are a lot of people who are becoming a lot more judicious in the way that they present that. But in order for it to really be affected, the masses have to start first. As an individual person, you have a lot more power than you realize. It doesn't feel like it, but you do, because you have the power of influence in your circle. And every circle touches other circles. So as a human being, if in your circle you say to your friends, hey, guys, you know what? Instead of like having a group WhatsApp chat that we're always talking on, let's go out at least once a month and hang and just put our phones away and just hang out. And then maybe once a week and things like that. And the more we understand that we actually have that power in our hands, the more we can actually build with it, because they will follow us, not the other way around. We just have to move it forward.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Which made me think of another point to make. But first of all, I do think also when there is a large, I don't know if I'd call it populace, but when you see the masses have a certain reaction, those with the power do react to that. I think back to a couple years ago, I don't remember the proper term, but the unkind term to this new department was Ministry of Truth, kind of a nod to the 1984. And it was an attempt, and I don't know enough to know whether it was an honest attempt or a dishonest attempt or whether it was control or to help, but there was this concept that, the federal government was going to start to determine whether information was being given truthfully and to be able to act upon that. And there was a pretty widespread negative reaction to that. And I believe that department just completely went away. And so I do think there is power collectively, especially, and I think that's a very good point for everyone to remember on an individual basis, that we have a lot of influence in our own sphere. I also would like to mention that I'm a horrible parent, because you just mentioned that we shouldn't just, hand the devices over to the kids. You'd mentioned about something, you worded it more eloquently, but something that I call adaptability, where I feel that as we get used to things, we handle them better. And I especially have seen that in our kids, where we have one in college who's a sophomore in college. And I feel that social media and the device, economy, if you will, just the way that everybody, handled that change, I feel like they handled it just as poorly as us adults, because I don't think that we were ready for that. But we have a couple more kids that are in middle school age, and their whole life they've had devices. I've always just let them have it. I don't want them to be surprised by what the world is when they get older. And that's just always been my approach, right or wrong. But one thing I've noticed with their age group, and it's not just my kids, it's really everybody that I see them associate with, they seem to be very balanced. They kind of take negative comments and things that are said online, trolling, as just like, that's just something on the app. They're not as affected by it. And there was a lot of, flashlight tag and playing baseball in the yard. And it seems like almost a mix of the way I grew up in the 80s, but with a technology aspect, and they're not overwhelmed by any of it. And they don't take it to heart. They don't get upset about this stuff the way that many do. And then there are definitely kids I see that do, that I just wonder there were kids that had anxiety when I was growing up, and, it may have been related to something else, gossip around school, what people were saying, passing notes. And, that always happens, but maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's too small of a sample size, but I'm actually hopeful. I think the younger kids now are growing up and they're more accustomed to the technology, the social media, and all of these things. And I feel like they're handling it really well.
I would, excuse me, I would agree. And here's the thing. I think we really messed up Gen Z, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think we didn't really understand the byproduct that we were creating and the atmosphere we were creating in it. There's a lot of books out there. My favorite social psychologist, Dr. Jonathan Haidt, he wrote a couple of incredible books, The Coddling of the American Mind, and the most recent one, The Anxious Generation. I think that Gen Alpha has a better chance because the Alpha's parents, my son is Gen Alpha, he's 7, and the Alpha parents are starting to see. They're seeing the repercussions of what happens the younger the children are. It doesn't mean they're all stopping right away, but they're starting to become more cognizant. So the more aware we become, the better we have to be able to implement different strategies. I teach parents all different strategies. One of the things, though, that I think we do ourselves a disservice in is like the American Academy of Pediatrics, the AAP. I was talking to somebody who's part of it, and we were talking about this, that they have a tendency to go right into making these very huge recommendations that are frankly unrealistic. So I was saying we need to actually make it a lot more realistic for parents to figure out, you can't just cut things cold turkey. How do we make this make sense for our family? So something that in my family we do is what we call no tech night. And when we're done with work and my son is home from school, there's no tech around us. We are playing board games. We are going out somewhere, just, when the weather's nice, we're taking walks, we're going to the park, we're doing all sorts of things. And it's wonderful. And for a lot of parents, I recommend, start with just once a week on a weeknight, after you're all home and stuff, even if you all just kind of end up sitting around doing nothing. And at first it's going to feel awkward. You're going to be like, I have to keep my child busy. But the truth is you don't. No. And you'll find that rhythm back again. I think what happens to us in the world is that humans, we are by nature makers of things. There's even a terminology for this. There's a terminology called Homo faber. There was a time when they thought maybe we should call ourselves Homo faber, not Homo sapien. Homo faber is man the maker. We actually are designed to design, to create. And what is it we create best? Tools. And we create tools to assess other tools. And then we create tools and get rid of other tools and create new tools and create. The issue isn't the tool creation. It's how we utilize the tool. Tools are meant to augment our lives. AI, all of these things, they're meant to augment our lives. All the things you do, security, these things are meant to augment our lives, not to replace things.
Right.
And we can't fall into the trap of leaning on it to the point, let's say it becomes a crutch. Now we're leaning on it to the point that we're weakened and we're unable to do it for ourselves. Like I know somebody who cannot go anywhere, even to the store, without putting his GPS on. And I'm like, here's the thing. When you lean on it so much, it becomes a crutch. It weakens your skill as a person to be able to do that for yourself. So test yourself every once in a while. Can I still get to this place with a map or directions from somebody? Let me see. The other problem is we fall into, after crutches, we fall into an addiction side. And there's just about an addiction for everything. Addiction is simply the capacity to utilize something as a mechanism of escaping something else. That's really what an addiction is. And you can do that with anything: technology, alcohol, drugs, food, exercise, even. So many things that are supposed to be a tool can turn into a crutch and then an addiction. And finally, the final category that I like to put it into is a weapon. And when we start to use technology as a weapon, which we do, we see that cyberbullying, we see, people putting in their narrative and that echo chamber of the narratives that become problematic. And we just need to be more cognizant of, am I utilizing this as a tool, right? Am I securing my home, but also ensuring that I know what to do in the event of an emergency, right? Or am I overly reliant on this thing that I don't know what to do if something goes wrong with it? And we just simply have to ask ourselves that. Am I using this as a tool? Am I using this as a tool to enhance and augment my life? If not, then maybe you need to do some reevaluating, and maybe you need to walk away from that thing for a little while and find something else, and then come back to it with a more logical, critical thinking, reasonable place.
Wow. It's actually very good advice.
You're
It's hard for
welcome.
me to go 10 minutes without a sandwich. So maybe I'll start with fasting and just try to, I don't know what I'm hiding from when I'm eating. I just really like food, but I think you're right.
Liking food is a beautiful thing, but having your focus be on food is a different thing. That can be detrimental, right? The focus problem is the issue. And it's funny. Here's the thing. We talk about being able to multitask. The truth is, that's not how humans are designed. We're not designed for multitasking. We're designed for deep focus and critical thinking. But because we are in an age of information overwhelm, technology overwhelm, markets are saturated with, which one app do I buy? There are 10,000 apps for this thing, to do this product or to get this thing. Which one do I do? We are actually not just in decision fatigue, but we are in decision overwhelm. We are at this place where it is nearly impossible that we are put into a state of what's our hyperarousal state, the fight, flight, freeze response, which there's actually 7. But we are in such a state of overwhelm that the best thing we can do, my husband's in IT, and when he says, when in doubt, turn it off.
Yeah.
Turn it off. Turn it off for a bit. Go do something else.
I like it. Although I am craving pizza right now. So, I'm doing my best to turn it off. So something else that we talked about that I thought was pretty interesting was some of the psychology around sales. So one thing that I was curious about is your thoughts around the psychology of sales, understanding how certain things are impactful, when you're trying to make a connection with your customer, when you're trying to make a sale. And one thing as a former salesperson, I really remember is the quotas always seem to get bigger and there's always pressure every week, every quarter, every year to just keep climbing, do more and more and more. I mean, how do you think that impacts the psychology of the sales process? Do you think that, if you're a sales leader, that is maybe counterproductive, or do we need that goalpost to constantly chase, in order to excel?
I think we have to slow down the goalpost. And here's why. Immediate gratification, immediate sales, immediate this, immediate that puts everybody into a state of turmoil and fear and unease. So let me get more specific about this. We know there's a thing called buyer's remorse, and it is a very important psychological component. Now, if you don't care about your customer and you're just there to sell them something and move on to the next person and sell them something, and you don't care, then it won't matter to you, and you'll pressure them and they'll buy the thing, and then they will have buyer's remorse. Now, even if the thing is valuable to them, they will still have buyer's remorse because of the pressure. They will question the decision they made because they made it from pressure, and pressure pushes us into our amygdala response, our limbic system, the area where our little fire alarm is going off in our brain that says, oh, okay, I got to get this. I got to get this. And then what happens when you leave? And after a while, their critical thinking comes back online. That's the prefrontal cortex. And when it comes back online, it says, was that a wise decision? See, because now we're back into critical thinking and we're like, oh, maybe that wasn't such a smart choice. So we do this thing and we say, was it really worth it? Was it valuable? And then there's a high probability that you'll lose that customer, that client at some point. At some point, they will wake up and they will say, you know what, this wasn't worth it, and I'm going to cancel this. The better choice, especially if you were in a leadership position in sales, is to understand slow growth and sustainability over time. So slow growth gives you the sustainability of loyal clients and loyal customers. So rather than being pushed to make a sale at the time that you are speaking with somebody, the healthier thing to do is build a connection with or without a sale. And then they will come back to you. This happens to me all the time. I have a slew of referrals constantly. I have a slew of people constantly coming in, and I can sustain a community of clients. They're no longer really clients, they're a community of people. And that helps me because I've built trust and connection and loyalty. And my integrity remains intact. So when you're selling, the objective shouldn't be to make the sale. The objective should be to make the connection and to be a resource for that person. When you become a resource for that person, they go to you. They're like, okay, so I do want to buy this now, now that they've had time to think about it. They're like, okay, I do want to buy this, but I have some questions. Can you help me understand this a little bit deeper? And then you do. And they're like, thank you so much. And then all they're left with is the value you gave them. And they're like, wow, that was really wonderful. And then they love the product. See, because now you've built trust and you've given them value. And they're like, oh, this is great. And then what happens? They refer other people to you. This is the guy you can trust to go to for your security needs. This is the person, this is the company that you want. You want to go to this company. They have shown loyalty to their customers, true loyalty, and they have integrity because they're not pushing that sale through right away. So what happens is it's a slower growing momentum, but when it picks up, it magnifies and multiplies extraordinarily. And suddenly, maybe months down the line, rather than weeks, but months down the line, you find yourself with more customers than you can handle. You're like, whoa, that's a lot. That's crazy. I've got so many people, I have to turn some people away. And I have to tell somebody to go to somebody else. And then you help them. See, the issue is we have a scarcity mindset. If I don't make this sale now, I'll never make another sale. And we get stuck in that mindset of, oh, it's all on the line. It's the sale or nothing. But that's not true. And if sales leadership can really, really understand that, it changes everything. Because would you rather be chasing down 30 sales only to the following month or two to have 20 of them say, forget it, and then you have to keep chasing the sales and keep chasing the sales? Wouldn't you rather develop relationships with your customers? I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that the sales professionals themselves, not even just the leadership, I mean, does it benefit them to understand the psychology of a sale a bit better?
Very much so. The truth is, in my mind, knowledge and wisdom, and then putting that knowledge and wisdom into practice is what makes the difference. I mean, having knowledge is a beautiful thing, but when you take that knowledge and wisdom and you're able to put it into tactical strategies, that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So yes, I believe everybody should understand the why and the how something happens. So with my clients, I don't just teach them communication tactics and strategies and tools. I actually give them the psychology behind it, the why. When I talk about a fear of public speaking, and for people who are afraid to public speak, it's really funny. About 75% of the populace actually has a fear of public speaking. Mm-hmm. But the other 25%, it's not that they're not nervous. It's not that they're not like worried. but they don't have an active fear. They're like, I think I can do this, but they still get nervous. They still get worried.
Mhm.
So I'm always like, well, here's the reason why you have a fear of public speaking. It comes from our psychological survival response. There are two main pieces to this. One is the social survival, and the other one is the self-worth survival. Both of those survival responses, on the social survival response, every human being wants to belong, needs to belong, in fact. Every human being has the need to belong, be appreciated, and be accepted. When we move into a space where we're potentially threatening that, like public speaking, because we're putting ourselves on a stage in front of other people, and maybe some of them are going to be like, oh, you're an idiot, or, oh, like this person is flubbing, oh, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. We're actively threatening them. And the same thing is with our self-worth. Our self-worth, we're the only people that need to live with us for the rest of our lives. Of course, if we choose a partner, they have to live with us too for as long as our lives are together. But you're the only one who needs to live with yourself, inside yourself 24/7. And so your self-worth is being potentially dinged. You go on a stage, you make a mistake, you mess up, you do something, you forget a line, even just forgetting a line, even just maybe not moving the way you wanted to move. And you're like, wow, was I thinking, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I did that. Like, oh, we're always more critical of ourselves than anyone else in the world. Even narcissists have a deep, deep, deep rooted insecurity about themselves, actually.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's the psychology of understanding what sales are about and not utilizing tactics like NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. In the science field, we call that a pseudoscience. And I believe that when it was first introduced, it was not something that was intended to be manipulative. It wasn't. I don't believe that. Most people don't create something from a purposefully manipulative place. However, over time, it became so. Over time, it became a tool and a tactic to manipulate people. And it's problematic. It's what I like to call the snake oil salesman version of healthy communication. So I know people who study it and who are really engaged in it. Okay, I can appreciate that. And I know people who use it as much with as much integrity as they can. But you're still trying to make something that got really tarnished into something that is clean. And it's better to go with healthy, effective communication. And there's a lot to be learned about communication. A lot.
Right. You just touched on the the public speaking, which oddly enough was the main reason we first spoke, but we have so many other interesting topics that we've covered. I do want to touch on that a little bit because, like I said, I think, we have our, big show in the security industry. ISC West is coming up, and I know that they're always looking for speakers. GSX is always looking for speakers in the other industries, in the AV and structured cabling. They're always, they put the invite out there, and they're very receptive to people doing that for the first time and getting involved. But like you said, so many people are really afraid to do that. And, I wanted to shine a spotlight on the fact that, if you can get over that fear, that can do a whole lot for your career. In marketing, we think a lot about branding, for a business. I think that's a given. People get it, but I think more and more people are starting to understand the idea of personal branding, especially in what in many industries right now is a tough job market. And if you can find your way out there to be a keynote speaker, and at some events, you don't know who's in that audience. Even if you stumble over a word and it's not perfect, you're going to make a really big impression and help yourself. So I want to encourage people to do this. What would be like your advice for someone who's thinking, yeah, maybe that's a good point, but man, there's no way I'm getting up there?
I'm going to say something, and this may sound like it's beneficial to me, but the truth is every person needs help. We need help in all measures of life. And if you're interested in doing that, don't go it alone. Don't try to stumble your way through it. You may make it, absolutely. But when you have a coach, or you have somebody who's a mentor or an advisor or somebody, the people who make it to the highest levels in their careers, they don't make it there alone. They make it there because they listen to the wisdom of others around them. They had mentors, they had advisors, they had coaches, they had, the support that they needed to get there and to keep improving along the way. That's the thing about a great coach. They're going to help you improve along the way. Now, public speaking is a behaviorally, I shouldn't even say public speaking in general, like physically expressive, we call it expressive communication, is a learned behavioral skill. This is something that was conditioned in your earliest environment. And over time, with each environment you go into and every place that you learn more things from, you pick up different ways to communicate. But when we don't actively practice on it, you could be a prodigy at something, you could be naturally talented at that thing. But if you don't then hone that thing, it only becomes a part of your natural talent. So if you're able to bypass the fear, there's so many other measures to make your communication skills 10,000 times more effective. And I really firmly believe that every person should look and seek for ways to do that, regardless of whatever it is. But the most important part is the practice. When we're able to practice and receive feedback, we start to learn. I think I just lost me. Oh, there we go.
You're
Okay.
back.
Just lost me for a second. I'm back. Okay. So when we're able to actually receive feedback, we start to understand, how am I being received by my audience and how do I want to be received? Those are two different things, because we can go off of our default mechanisms, but default is what we know. We don't know what we don't know.
Right.
That a lot of people will say that. What they really mean is you are living in a place where you've got some blinders on and you may not even be aware that those blinders are there. For instance, one of the things, I'll give you an example. One of the things I see for some people is when they get nervous, they pace. That pacing energy shows to the audience. When they get nervous, they talk too fast. That is really ineffective when you're speaking with an audience. So there are so many ways to improve upon these things, but you have to be willing to be wrong first, be humble, and be understanding that you've got a lot of spaces for improvement, and find somebody who can help you improve. Now, the other thing I will say is that we tend to lean on what our natural inclination is, without the awareness that maybe that natural inclination is something that drives other people away, not attracts them to us.
Like my jokes.
I don't know, maybe not. Listen, and it's funny because I'm a terrible joke teller, so I'm awful. I will start with the punchline. I'll say, wait, no, that's not it. Hold on. I'm terrible. I am capable of making my audience laugh. And what's really important, I just lost my train of thought. Hang on, let me reel that train back in. Is knowing you're human speaking to other humans. And they're not expecting perfection. In fact,
Right.
Connect to perfection. We don't connect to perfection. We connect to real human engagement.
Yeah.
You don't want somebody pitying you. I went to an event the other day and one of the speakers kept losing their train of thought and had to pull out their script multiple times. Now, at first, everybody's empathetic, but then we move from empathy into pity. And then we get really cringe. And it's like, ooh, I'm really uncomfortable now because this person is like really messing up. So, oh God, I don't want that to be me. And then we're so embarrassed for them. We're feeling the embarrassment almost as if we're feeling it for ourselves. And then we can't really hear the subject matter. So of course, we don't want to get to that point, but we can be really naturally human on that stage without apology. Something I will tell every single speaker is the worst thing you can do is walk out there and say, I'm so sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. Yeah, No, 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 no. Here's the thing. Your nervousness is like the elephant in the room. You can acknowledge it, but you don't have to apologize for it. You can walk out on stage and go, "Ooh, I shouldn't have had that big lunch." Okay. Yeah, well, I am excited to be here. A little nervous, but excited to be here. Okay, maybe a little bit more than a little nervous, but really excited. All right, guys, let's get started on this. And now we've acknowledged it, but we haven't apologized for it.
Yeah.
So now what happens when we stumble a little bit, when we miss something, when we mess something up? The audience is empathetic, but not pitying. And they're able to set that awareness aside. They're like, oh, they just messed a little bit because they're nervous. Okay. And they set that aside and then they're able to refocus on what we're saying.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing. And it's really helping other people connect to your humanity.
That's interesting. I think a big key there that I'm hearing is just not to let things become a distraction.
Yes, exactly.
You know, and I think that something you pointed out is I think a lot of people are really turned off by perfection, which is nothing that I ever have to worry about. But I know that we see people. I mean, what do they always say? Never trust a perfect person. Never trust a song that's flawless. It may actually just be a line from a 21 Pilots song, but it's we kind of despise that a little bit, or we feel that it's insincere, it's phony, because no one is perfect. So we're just like, I don't know. There's something going on here. We don't trust it. Kind of back to the AI, where I think
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, people don't want perfect. They want good information. We don't trust the information they're getting. But I mean, I think that's maybe one of our defense mechanisms, possibly, that we say, hey, this can't be real.
Yes, exactly. Right back to AI. We know there's no such thing as human perfection. In the core of us, we know that, which is why perfectionists are their own worst enemy.
Right.
We know that it's not possible to be perfect. And if we're trying to achieve our vision of perfection, because everybody has something different in their minds as perfection, we're always going to be lacking. So why not revel in the mistakes? I am the biggest klutz. I will choke on air. I will trip over literally nothing. And, it happens. And my husband's like, oh, okay, yep. Yet when we were trying to have children and we were struggling through infertility issues, he said to me the most incredibly beautiful thing when we were deciding if we should have a child that wasn't biologically our own or not. He said, if I can't have a child that has your quirks, I don't want one. And it made me fall even more in love with him, because it reminded me that, our quirks are actually what make us perfect in other people's eyes. Our quirks are what make us beautiful. You see a face that's perfectly symmetrical and you're like, and you're looking for the problem. And that's, it is actually a part of our survival mechanism. We are naturally geared to look for what's wrong. What's wrong with this picture? What's different about this environment? What is threatening me? And because of that natural instinct, when something looks seemingly perfect, our alarm bell immediately goes off and says, what are they hiding here?
Right.
Here's a great one. And this goes for anybody who wants to publicly speak. Never put your hands behind your back for the entire time you're speaking. Our hands are actually signifying our threat level. When we were caveman time, our hands, if you know why we wave at people? Look, I'm not an enemy. I'm not holding any weapon in my hand.
Right.
Okay, hi there. When people see that hand and they see that palm, they're like, no threat. Okay, great. And it's so ingrained in our DNA. It is so ingrained in us, we're not even aware of that. But if you walk out on a stage and your hands are entirely behind your back, like we're having a conversation right now over virtual. Best thing I can tell people when you're having a conversation on virtual is use your hands at some point. In fact, the earlier the better. Wave to someone, say, hey, how you doing?
I try so hard to keep mine down.
No,
Like Ricky
no.
Bobby, I don't want to do anything with my hands.
Get those hands up. Get those hands up because it speaks to people and
Yeah.
gives them a sense of security. It says this person is no threat to me. Bring those hands up at some point. And the earlier the better. Now, do you want to be waving your hands around the entire time? No, you don't really want to look like that, you know? But you do want to use your body language. 90%, hear me on this, 90% of communication is nonverbal. 90%. It's not about the words. It's about so much more than the words. In body language alone, we have our facial expressions, our eye contact. We have our head positioning, our body positioning, our body posture. We have our gesticulations and we have our gestures, which are like, the things we specifically do. Like I'm giving you a thumbs up right now, right?
Mhm.
So we have so many components to what speaks for us. And that's just our body language alone. Then we go into what in linguistics we call it prosodics and suprasegmentals. In layman's terms, it's called vocal varieties. There are at minimum 8. I like to go with 8. There are 8 different vocal varieties that we utilize. So it's not just about the words. It's about how we're shaping those words, how we're saying those words, and the deeper meaning and context other people are picking up behind the words. There's so many pieces to communication that people are usually not inherently consciously aware of unless you're studying it. It's just like, here's the funny thing. I work in communications, right? But I work in the field of parenting and also loss and grieving. And at the core of all of this is the way we communicate. So when it comes to for parenting, something I will tell every parent is, parenting is the hardest job you'll ever take on with no training. But why is that? The same thing is true for the skills we develop over time, our communication skills, our behavioral skills. There's so many components to behavioral skills that are not innate. In fact, none of it's innate. Really, our social emotional development is not innate in us. It is a learned skill that we pick up and we develop in early childhood from those who are around us, our primary caregivers. These are things I shouldn't be the only one who knows this, and people like myself who are in these fields of studies are not the only ones who should know this. My job, I want my job to be putting myself out of a job. I do not want my clients to hold on to me forever. I want to give them the knowledge and practice with them enough to the point where they're like, Yorona, I don't need you anymore. Cool. Awesome. Go forth and have an incredible life, and touch points with me whenever you want to. And the same thing should be true for building our client base. We should have a sustainable, long-lasting connection.
Right.
But with the security of knowing we're there for each other should we need each other. And we're utilizing the product of that person, perhaps, or that company, but we don't have to maintain that constant search for something for help and assistance. Okay? If we're doing a good enough job for our clients and customers, they shouldn't need to be calling us every single day. We don't want that kind of a client, right?
Yeah.
Healthy boundaries, people.
I like that. I feel like I've just been through a session. I feel very relaxed. I feel very inquisitive. I've given us a lot to think about today. I knew this would be a fun one. I knew that we would have some great insight from you. I want to make sure, I think there's a lot of folks out there that could benefit from your coaching and your services. And just remember, the best athletes, the best, real estate moguls, the best technology leaders. I mean, a lot of people have a lot of coaching and resources that they turn to, to be the best version of themselves that they can be and to have the best possible experience. So for anyone that's interested, how could they reach out to you?
Easiest thing to do is to email me, YoronaBoster@gmail.com, or go to my website, YoronaBoster.com, and reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's a really great place. That's how you and I met. I'm on there quite frequently when I'm not working, which I'm always working. So usually it's at 2:00 in the morning and people are like, why is she writing at 2:00 in the morning? But yeah, definitely reach out to me anytime. I am open for any just questions people have. I love questions. You know what I like to say? The only bad question is the question that goes unasked.
I like that. That's good. That's a good one to end on. We'll take that. So, and obviously I could see you posted your site there also, YaronaBoster.com as well, where they can find you. So really appreciate you coming on. I mean, this is a little bit of a change of pace, but honestly, after, I was thinking about you when we had our last guest on, Dawn Marone, and I thought, wow, this is going to be actually really great to see the other side of this, the human side of this. And you did not disappoint. So thanks again for coming on. And for the rest of you, we'll have more great episodes coming your way. I have an amazing guest next week. And unfortunately, I'll be on the road. So, we're going to go from a half-built studio to a hotel room. But the show must go on. Yorona, thank you so much. And for everyone else, we'll see you again next week.